Once upon a time, there was a king who had dreams. And he could tell the future from these dreams. And once he dreamed that next year's harvest would yield tainted grain that would make everyone who ate it mad, crazy. So he asked his wise counselor, what should we do? And the counselor said, we must save back from this year's harvest enough grain for you and I to eat next year, so at least we will stay sane. So the king scratches his head, pulls on his beard, narrows his eyes, adjusts his crown, purses his lips, pauses a pregnant pause, and says, no, that is not a good idea. Because if we do this, we will remain sane while everyone else is mad, and everyone will say that we are crazy. And because we're the only ones who are sane, we will be crazy. They'll be right. So the counselor says, then what shall we do? And the king says, we must eat the tainted grain along with everybody else. The counselor says, but then we'll be crazy too, and how are we going to rule the kingdom if we're crazy? And the king says, yes, but on each of our foreheads we will affix a little dot, a little mark. When I look at you, I will see your mark, and when you look at me, you'll see mine. And yes, we'll be mad, but when we look at one another, we'll see the marks on our foreheads, and that will remind us that we are mad. We'll know we're mad. And therefore, madly, we will be sane. And so we will be able to rule the kingdom very well.
Hello, I'm Jim.
And I'm Jeff O'Keefe.
Welcome to the Peacemakers Podcast. That was the story of the tainted grain by Rebbe Nachman, and brought to life by our guest today, Zen teacher and poet Norman Fischer.
A prophetic dream, a kingdom about to go mad, and a decision that flips everything upside down. The king chooses to eat the tainted grain on purpose.
It reminds me a little bit of shamanic traditions, where everything gets turned backwards to reveal a deeper truth.
That same spirit is alive in the Zen Peacemakers Order of Disorder, where we find clarity inside of confusion and moments of joy, even in the darkest times.
Norman takes this parable and walks it right into our lives. What does it mean to live in a world that's upside down and still remember what matters?
This talk is full of humility, art, and the kind of honesty that doesn't try to fix anything. It just lets us see things more clearly.
This is the Bodhisattva path. We don't transcend anything. We don't go beyond anything. We don't go beyond anybody. We don't get enlightened. Dogen says, beyond enlightenment. We're crazy like everybody else. Probably we didn't have any choice anyway. But we help each other by reminding each other that we are crazy. And when we know that we're crazy, we're sane. And that makes all the difference. But ultimately, the Buddha thought, we will not have ease and rest until we go beyond the self, because the self is radically vulnerable, and the self knows this. That's why it's always creating so many problems, because it really understands, however, unconsciously, its radical vulnerability. And that's why we always end up behaving so stupidly, so childishly. That's why the world is the way it is. And this is why, ultimately, compassion and love are what the self really needs. It's the best thing for the self, in the sense that nothing brings relief to the self more than throwing the self away and caring for others. And when we see that others actually are the self, and that the self actually is others, then we're free to love without holding back. Loving because it's right and true, not because we're going to get something out of it. When we see that suffering is not ours, but it's just suffering, the common suffering, the human suffering, life's suffering, then for us, there's no more of what we think of as suffering. To be honest, when I think of the catastrophe that my own self is, how it's never ever satisfied, how it's so critical, so judgmental, so sexist and racist and smug and self-destructive and on and on and on, it could be a little dismaying. I could be rushing around trying to deny all this, or maybe justify it somehow, or try to fix it if I could, or if not fix it, at least fake it, so I look like a dignified Zen person and you would never know these things unless I told you. Maybe I'm telling you, you don't believe it. But at this point in my life, none of those strategies work for me, because I just cannot believe in them. Maybe I'm, revealing more than I should. Maybe this is just letting you know what a crazy person I am. But the thing is, I don't really think it's just me. I don't think it's just me. I think it's everybody. I think we're all crazy in one way or another like this. Probably, I don't much use the word transcendence, although it's not a bad word. But I do feel like I do want to be greater inside. I want to be great inside. And to me, this is the longing of the ego, the longing of the self, the longing that I have. And maybe everyone has this longing. And all our other longings, that we should be beautiful, desirable, upright, moral, well thought of, that we should be enlightened, famous, accomplished, that we should be well loved by everyone, whatever our other longings are, whatever it is we think we want, I think all of these things are just displacements of what we really, really do want, to become great inside. Because to be great outside is pretty meaningless if we don't feel great inside. And conversely, when we are great inside, then it doesn't matter how much greatness or not greatness we display outside. And maybe that's what transcendence is. This desire for inner greatness. That we go beyond our small, crabby selves to what we call in Zen our true selves, our original selves before our parents were born, that are great inside, no matter what happens on the outside. So this takes some doing, of course. And if you think about all the things we do in practice, from zazen to bowing, to meetings with our teachers, meetings with our sangha, to practices that are dear to the peacemaker order, like bearing witness to suffering, or working on behalf of sentient beings in large ways and in small ways, standing side by side with them. All these practices really, in the end, come down to this: that we could see through our sad, crabby, small selves, to see what our self really is, and in seeing that, find greatness inside ourselves. Our thinking, calculating mind is by its nature a critical mind, which means it divides, it discriminates, it sees distinctions, and it seeks advantage. And it's almost a game for the mind to do this. The mind is strengthened when it plays this game. And we all have minds, so this is part of us. And we're not going to get over this. And in many ways, it's a good thing. But we also have hearts, which want to love and to unite. So we practice to understand our mind and strengthen our heart. I think this is our goal, not to change our mind, but to truly understand our mind and to strengthen our loving, uniting heart. The idea is that we can actually practice a certain set of attitudes and perspectives, or even radically change our outlook in relationship to life and reality. And if we can do that, we can see that all circumstances can appear friendly in our experience. When you take for granted, when you simply assume, without challenging it, that you are you, everybody else is everybody else, and it is a dog-eat-dog world, so you better watch out for yourself and those you love against all others, that history's going in a bad direction, that the bad guys are in charge and they must be defeated. When you believe this is the world that we read about every day, when you believe that is describing the world as it truly is and only is, a terrible world, a threatening world, you can really get depressed. Because human beings need one another, they have benevolence. They care about one another. But benevolence seems to be insufficient. There's not enough benevolence to ensure that we will always treat one another fairly. When spiritual practice is given an important place as a countervailing force, then there will be more benevolence, and self-interest will eventually become massaged into a more wholesome kind of self-love. And isn't that what Bodhisattva practice is all about? Isn't it the journey toward self-love and benevolence eventually becoming identical? I think we really need to move to a caring economy where what's valued is not creative self-interest, but benevolence and a true self-love. The world we experience literally and truly is a product of our minds, our attitudes, and how we live in this world is based on our ideas about it. So when we commit ourselves to the path of bodhicitta, to caring for all beings, and set forth for our lives a path of practice, the simple basic practices of bodhisattvas: generosity, ethical conduct, patient forbearance, energy, meditation, and transcendent wisdom. And this is a path for a whole lifetime and beyond. When we have a path like that in our lives, then for sure the world will be otherwise. And we can live in it with happiness and be a blessing for others, even though there will be no shortage of really terrible and dangerous things going on. To live in a friendly world, to see the world as friendly and experience it that way, doesn't mean that things are going to be as we like them. It means that we are willing to fully surrender to impermanence, surrender to the way things are, and live with confidence that when difficult things occur, as they definitely will, we'll find a way to accept them completely as our practice, as a way to increase our love and compassion, even when things are hard.
That was our guest today, Norman Fischer.
Maybe what this story reminds us is that we're all affected. No one escapes the grain.
But what we can do is remind each other. We can look at one another and remember, oh right, the world's a little mad, and we're in this together.
And that's where the wonder lives. That's the wildness of the Bodhisattva path. Being fully in the world, not above it, not outside of it, just present, together.
If Norman's talk stirred something in you, some sense of connection, or just a breath of insight, we invite you to support this work.
Become a paying subscriber to the Peacemakers Podcast, or join the Zen Peacemakers community as a member. You can learn more at www.zenpeacemakers.org.
Thanks for walking with us today.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Peacemakers Podcast.
Be well, and keep finding the sacred in the upside down.